Welcome to Screen Bytes, a podcast about video games, technology, TV, and movies. Please expect spoilers for Severance Season 2, Episode 2.
We're here to talk about Severance Season 2, Episode 2.
Yep. Goodbye, Mrs. Selvig.
Goodbye, Mrs. Oh, yeah. Mark's wife, is that?
No.
What are you on about?
Mrs. Selvig is Mark's neighbour, who is also Miss Cabell.
Ah, yeah. That's right, yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll get onto that. But basically, this episode was basically filled in the gaps of the questions that we had in episode 1, where they started bringing up stuff like it's been 5 months after. And we know we had some questions like, was Milchek lying about certain stuff? And it turns out he was. About the other employees. He said that they didn't want to come back, but actually they did what we actually suggested is, we said, like, if they fired them, there wouldn't be a show. But that's what they did. And I was like, oh, that's actually quite interesting. I was like, they actually, they did fire him. And yeah, okay, that's jumping the gun a little bit, but...
Well, they did fire them, but not all of them. They fired everyone but Mark. Mark was the only one they wanted to come back. So originally they tried to carry on with 3 other people, but keeping Mark on for some reason. And, you know, it's something that I found quite funny is that there was a lot of speculation that came out of episode 1 and looking back at the first season and just like trying to predict what was going to happen. And I know I had this expectation that there was some mysteries or some things that were going to be mysteries for quite a few episodes. And then in this episode, they just kind of like, nope, what you thought here, yep, that's what happened. What you thought here, yep, that's exactly what's happened. Your theories and guesses, yep, they're all correct. However, here's a whole load more questions that you're going to want the answer to, which I thought was quite funny because people love to analyse this show. They love to sort of like sit down and think about what's going on. And it's like, Jen and I rewatched it again today, just so it's a bit more fresh in my mind. And there was like a couple of bits, here and there where we were looking at things and it was just like shocked face emoji sort of moments, sort of like realising what that might be meaning, what it could mean, potentially what it doesn't mean, that kind of thing. So
so there were some flaws with it as well, this episode, where I thought, yeah, I don't want to go. Let's start off with the fact that Milchek, basically they have a meeting after the incident with Helena, and she says to Milchek, oh, okay, you need to go off and talk to the outies and explain and see what they know. See if they know anything. Yeah,
find out what has been said, what's been leaked to the outside world.
And she produces a video in which she says she's under medication for some sort of treatment with her arm, and so unfortunately she did something really silly by drinking alcohol, and that kind of messed up with the medication, messed with her head, and that's why she gave this bizarre statement earlier. And she just rectified the situation and said that I was under the influence of this. Please excuse my behaviour. And, yeah, everything's hunky-dory. There's nothing to worry about. And what I found interesting so the Milchek first then goes to Irving, sorry.
I'm going to have to make you a list of character names like we did for Fallout. I think I might do that.
Irving, sorry. And, yeah, it was kind of weird. He's like, oh, anything strange happened tonight? And he's like, no, not really. I was watching TV. I kind of enjoyed this TV program, blah, 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 blah. And then he's like, yeah. And he's like, well, you know, he starts talking like, Milchek starts talking a bit weird. And he's like, oh, okay, what's this all about then? Why are you coming here at the middle of the night, disturbing me? Basically, he tells him he's fired. He also does this to Dylan as well, where he goes to and says there was an incident where you got quite violent. Which was quite smart
because he already had the head injury.
Yeah, and we can't, keep this behaviour. Blah blah blah. We're gonna have to let you go. We don't want to let you go. We love you, but because of your Innie's behaviour, it's just not acceptable. And that was quite interesting. So he has to then go and get another job, try and find another job because he's like, whoa, what do I do? I'm screwed. And his first thought is to go and find a job at a door factory or door shop. When I was watching it, when I was watching him doing the interview, I was thinking, the guy that's asking the question, is he for real? Like, because he asks the question, like, what did you want to be when you were like 5 or 6 years old? And he's like,
No,
and he goes,
no, it's not, he didn't. No, he didn't ask the question. Dylan was like, "Oh, I've been mad about doors since I was 5." And the interviewer's like, "He just think he's making it up. He thinks he's bullshitting him. Just interview stuff." So he's challenging it. That's actually a good interview technique sort of thing. And then Dylan, he crushes it. He's like, "Yeah, no." I was like, but he gives good answers to his next sort of. To the follow-up questions, he gives good responses.
It just felt so strange to me. I was like, yeah, this is all bullshit. Like, how can you be 5 years old, be interested with doors? Like, this is so stupid. Like, the interview is just like, what is going on here? The guy should have just been like, yeah, no, I don't think you got it, mate, because you're just, you're making silly statements like this. But like you say, he managed to pull something out of his head and start saying some stuff about doors and the way they look. And then he says to the guy, but my previous job was he was at
Lumen
as well as,
and he was Lumen on the Severance floor, and then that kind of changes the mood with the interviewer. This is where we start to see, we've seen it a little bit in the first episode when Mark was at that dinner party and people were sort of like awkwardly asking him about the Severance program, but here we really see the stigmatism around people who are severed and the prejudices that people have against people who are severed.
So this guy really doesn't like the fact that he probably just thinks, well, in the mindset, like someone who's done that to themselves to be lazy, as it will, like because you're letting someone else technically take over and do the work for you.
Is he being lazy? Is he running from something?
You haven't really got any job experience then because you haven't actually been doing the job.
Exactly, yeah. It's like a gap in employment, essentially.
Yeah, that's the way I would look at it. It's like, oh, wait a minute, you've been with Severance program for like 5 years?
And he's had lots of short jobs before that as well. But Jen pointed out Dylan's question to the interviewer, like the only question that he had really was like, what are your benefits? And he seemed really interested in the fact that there was healthcare benefits for his family. And thinking about all the different people and why different people have entered the Severance program, Jen was pondering if maybe his wife or one of his children had a long-term medical illness. He's not a well-off person except for working at Lumen. So he's done these short stints of working at various companies before, but they've not lasted too long. They're probably not paid too well. But Severance has been a job that he's kept for, like what you say, 5 years. It's probably paid decently enough, and it's provided his family with healthcare. And we know he's got a young family, but they're kind of like not. They might be like 3, 5, and 10, that kind of sort of age. We're just sort of like guessing because we've only seen the one child. But then he's like asking, "Oh, do I need to go get some baby wipies?" And it's just like this sort of like. There's just something about that that's like he's I don't want to say he's resigned, but he's like
I gotta get a real job.
Well, it's not just that. It's not just the fact that he's got to care for his family, but it's like there was a real weight to it, more than like that's not a line that would be in a normal family, a normal TV family. Like, who cares about baby wipes? It's like
I do.
Yeah, well, you do because you're a father. But and it's like also thinking back to Dylan, the innie Dylan from season 1 particularly, he was very sort of, he thought his outie was like this super rich guy or family guy or something like this. Yeah, like he had these grand visions of his outie being this super confident guy, but actually his outie he seems to have like real issues. We don't know exactly what they are, but he's not confident, or he's not as confident as innie Dylan. Yeah, like there seems to be something going on with his family that is what has pushed him to do the Severance program. So this is something that we're kind of like seeing, is the innies and the outies seem to have traits that complement each other if the situations are completely different. And we might talk about it later with like Helena and Helly and everyone else. But it is quite interesting seeing, I think his job interview scene was quite important, probably one of the more important scenes in this episode outside of what's going on with Mark.
Yeah. We got some real depth to his character outside. But bringing it back to kind of at the start. So Cabell, she actually gets called into a meeting and she gets a promotion.
Mm-hmm.
But that promotion isn't really like, that's just like, you need to get out of this department. It's just a way of like, instead of firing someone.
Yeah, it's like getting rid of her. And like she says, you don't need me. You're scared of me. And of course, Helena's like, we don't fear anyone. But in actual fact, they do. Like they want her working for them so that they can control her, because she's obviously got information and access to things that they would rather be part of.
The strangest thing where I think there was a mistake was when Milchek visits Irvin and Dylan. Then he goes and visits Mark. Now, before he visits Mark, the people around Mark are like, yeah, you were saying some weird stuff just a minute ago, but I think you were talking like about the baby. And I think you were just having one of those things because you was holding your wife's picture. And so they were just about to let it all go and just put it down to him having problems with his wife.
Not really.
It seemed like it was...
Not really.
Well, it seemed like that. Like the sister... His sister, isn't it?
So his sister wasn't going to do that at all. She wasn't going to let it go. His brother-in-law, his sister's partner or husband,
yeah,
he was saying those things to kind of like appease Mark, to not upset Mark. Maybe a little bit because he's a bit self-centered, and maybe he genuinely thought that Mark was talking about the baby. It's a bit hard to tell if he was how selfish Rickon is being, or if he is actually being genuine to Mark and being a bit more sensitive and trying not to upset him. Whereas Devin, his sister, is like, fuck this shit. I spoke to your innie. She's like, let's Occam's razor this shit. And she was super blunt about it. So,
but
yes,
was that before Milchek turned up? I don't think she was like super blunt about it. She kind of went along with...
She wouldn't let it go. She's a dog with a bone about this thing. She said something about it being about Gemma. Then Mark said, oh no, it must be about the baby. Then Rickon said, oh, it must be about the baby. He kind of agreed just to keep Mark happy. Then Devin was like, no, I don't think it is. And then that's when Milchek came, and she was very sour patch face. And
because at that point when Milchek turns up, you then know for definite that something has happened. But he could have just not turned up at all, and that would probably have been the smarter thing in that case, I suppose. I don't know. It's hard to know these things, because in the other two scenarios,
big companies, they want to know everything that's happened that is out of their control. If they feel like they're not in control, they've got to understand what's happened. So they're just trying to get all the information so they can work out what they need to do next. So their hand was forced. They kind of had to.
Yeah,
because people noticed. People in the real world have noticed this.
It's kind of weird though how he just came in and was like, well, there was, there was a machine that a group of you operated, and he's like, I don't know anything about a machine. He's like, well, it's in the documentation, page 7, and he goes, they managed to gain access to you, violate you for like, what was it, 30 minutes or something, and in that time, do you know anything like what you were saying or anything like that? Yeah, and she did say like something really nasty to Milchek about like them being violated or something. Well, the innies being mistreated, if I remember correctly. But it all ends on a good note, I suppose, because he's like, well, if you know anything more, then let me know. But yeah, I'll see you Monday. And then the guy's like, not really sure. So Mark, the outie's like, oh, I don't know. This is...
Because he was already thinking about quitting, wasn't he? And then this happened. And then Milchek came and kind of confirmed something.
Yeah, they wanted him to quit, and he wasn't really sure about it because he's still getting over his wife.
Yeah, because, the end of season 1, in that episode, he was trying to talk to Devin as outie, and that's what he was about to say. Then he accidentally sort of said it to Cabell Selvig. And that's partly how he managed to out himself to Selvig.
Yeah, that's right.
So he was... And obviously, remember, this is only half an hour ago before the scene we're seeing. So, like, he started this evening thinking that he was going to quit Lumen, and then this weird thing happened, and then Lumen showed up trying to do damage control. So he's like, yeah, I'm not sure if I actually want to come back, because I was already thinking about not coming back anyway.
And what would you do with that situation, Josh? Because I was thinking at that point, yeah, maybe just give this up, forget about it now, just get on with my life. But then his sister is like, you can't do that. Or he says that, like, he actually, no, Milchek says that to him, like, you can't deprive of life.
Well,
He's trying to, like,
Milchek actually showed sort of whether he believed it or not. He showed some respect towards the Innie Mark, because he said what Innie Mark did was, it was wrong, but it was very courageous. And he said, don't reward his bravery with non-existence or something like that. And it's a sort of thing that it's like, I don't think Milchek would really say that. I don't think he really believes it, but it was a very good line to kind of make Mark think about Innie Mark and allowing him to kind of have some existence. And when Milchek comes back a second time, he says similar sorts of things, to try and make Outie Mark be compassionate towards Innie Mark, and also the fact that how Innie Mark, his happiness and his romance, his love might spill to Outie Mark, that kind of thing. So
that's right, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, he was saying the love that he's made in there could come to you in your feeling, I suppose. But so it was quite interesting after that we saw that they got these new people in, and that was like right near the start of the episode. The new workers, and then one of them's been transferred, and then because of what Mark did, contacting the board in episode 1 of season 2, they were persuaded to get them back. So that he starts coming around, he starts turning back up to their houses, saying, "Please come back. We made a big mistake."
This is the thing, right? We have actually just found out that none of the other 3 matter, but Mark is very important. It seems to be the Severance program centers around Mark. Now, I know we spoke at the end of last episode, we were talking about Mark and Gemma sort of like being connected through the work that MDR are doing. So Miss Casey, Gemma, is alive. Whatever Mark is doing, Casey is watching, or she's connected to it. And he's doing something to make her live, or her brain function, or something. So, and this is one of those things where it's like, this is one of those mysteries that I thought was going to get stretched out for the season, but they kind of laid it on the table in this episode. We're like, no, Mark is very important, but the rest are disposable. And then, that's when Milchek is like, okay, right, we're going to have to get all the rest back, because if Mark demands to have his team back, well, then we're going to have to give him his team back. So Dylan goes back, Irving goes back, and then the board, they send Helly back.
Yes. Before she goes back, she has been watching footage of Mark and herself interacting. And I do think what you said in episode 1 is true. I don't think that is the Innie Helena. I think that's the Outie, definitely, because she's been trying to mimic her Innie self, and it's very obvious, as that's kind of jumping way to the near the end, but the way she enters the lift.
Well, I mean, we can talk about it, because it's like when they all go through the lift, there's a ding that happens when they change from Innie to Outie, Outie to Innie. But when Helena enters that lift and goes down, you just hear the lift moving. You don't hear that ding. So it's basically, it's not really even a secret anymore that Helly isn't in this season, or she's not in these 2 episodes at least. And who we're seeing is Helena going down, trying to be Helly.
I thought it was funny though, the other guy who's been appointed to this into the office, those guys that were meant to replace him, then they get fired, and then they see him outside. And they said, and they get angry. So before they get to lift, you see him, one of them, the old chap, getting angry. He's like, I've been here for so long and you're getting rid of me. What's going on?
No, he's like, I've been here. No, I said, I've been here for 3 days. I broke a lease for this.
And, but it's funny because then the other lot don't know really, like, they're actually affecting him and they're replacing him. It's because of them, or because of Mark. It's all Mark's fault. And it's quite funny that all these people go in one at a time and they don't really interact or see each other. But when they're inside, they're like, it's quite unique to see something like, that as a story. And it's also funny that they showed like the security guard as well I thought that was quite fun. So Mark,
the one outside the lift.
Yeah. So Mark keep going in and he's like, but then when he came out, he was just, comes in, he's like, hey, good morning. And then he comes on and like, yeah, good evening. He's kind of tired up at the end of it.
So that was linking in with the 3 days he was in Lumen before the before he got the old team back. And so that day where he went in and Milchek found the note that he had planted in Mark West's or Mark W's jacket, and then he sent him home early. Well, that was day 3. And if you look at that section, the clock behind the security guard, it's like 9:12, 5:15, 9:03, 5:10, and then the third day it's like 9:03, and then he goes home at 9:15. So those days where we see him go in, out, in, out, in, out, those are the days before Milchek has gone and rehired Irving and Dylan. And then we have the final one where they all go down that lift. And then we're back. The 2 episodes have kind of like merged together. And I suppose from now we're going to get innie and outie versions of everyone sort of like mixed together again. Except for Helena or Helly. So we would be remiss to not mention the new title sequence.
Well, that's not the end then, was it though?
That's pretty much the end.
No, because Mark, the outie Mark, and I was like thinking in my head, like Milchek mentions this to them when he's talking to him at the party, that Cabell is not going to be. She was kind of a wild one, and she was doing some strange stuff like being like imposing on you, being your neighbor and stuff like that, and she won't be doing this anymore. She's been moved or removed. But then obviously like it's hard just to sell a house in like a few days, so obviously she's going to be still living next to Mark.
Yeah.
And then Mark knocks on the door but there's no answer, and then he tries again a few days later, or sees her
as he's
going
got
to
home.
work.
Yeah.
And she actually shouts out to him or something, "Oh, you're back from work," or something like that. And he asks the question like, "What's going?" I think he's shouting like, "What's going on? Why?"
He went up to her initially. He was like mad, like, "What the f*** are you doing? Who are you? You were in my house. I ate your shitty fucking cookies."
Yeah. Which is right on.
Oh, they got you back, Mark. Did they come with a pineapple, Mark?
Yeah, that's what she said, yeah.
Yeah. She has such... So, Cobell, she's such a strange woman. Like, she's very into the Kia religion.
She's perverted.
For whatever. She's very... she's got these... Like, she's probably more into Kia than, say, Helena is, or, Milchek or whatever. All these people who are, like, super sort of, like, loyal. Like, Cabell is, like, 10 times. Don't know why. We've seen that shrine and that medical thing at the end of season 1. But, so she has this loyalty to this company, but the company has slighted her, and she actually still feels... she hasn't accepted the job offer yet, so she still feels angry about what's going on. And then what's going on with Mark, I don't know. Now, maybe like it was her idea, the Severance, not the whole Severance thing, but the whole. So now going back into like the sort of like conspiracy theory, perhaps. They had a sort of like a bribe going on with like the ambulance service, and they were like, "Oh, if you have any sort of like comatose victims, we'll take them, and then we'll just pretend that they're dead." And then, so they've got this body of Gemma, and then they eventually went to her grieving husband and offered him a job at Lumen in the Severance ward, in the Severance department, to kind of like help him with his grieving. And then they've got these two people who are very, very intimately linked together, but have no idea who each other are. And then something with this Severance program, the work that they're doing is doing something. And then I'm not going to go into it now, but then there's this whole thing about whether that's going to be bringing back, reincarnating Kia Egan again. That's so maybe they're testing reincarnation on her before they try and reincarnate Kia Egan on another body or someone else later on. So, but Miss
Cabell is just very strange.
She's just very strange, and then she goes literal batshit crazy, like screaming, beeping at the car, beeping at the horn, and then she just drives straight at Mark, even though she knows how important he is.
it kind of felt like she was holding something back that she wanted to get out.
Yeah, well, because he asked, like, do you know about Gemma? Do you know something about Gemma?
Yeah, about his wife.
And then
yeah,
you could see on her face that she
wants to say, but she can't.
I don't think she wants to say. I think she realizes, like, things have gone further than it can be recovered from. You know, they can't save face anymore. He knows too much. But she can't say anything. She doesn't currently work at Lumen, and she can't, you know.
But it's very strange though, because if you think about it, so she's an owie. Like she doesn't have an innie or an owie. She just goes in. Same with Milchek. They don't have any. And then she's neighbours to Mark.
That's a very weird bit, and I don't know how Lumen didn't know this.
Yeah, but my question is, at one point where the outside Mark turns up to work, did they not use the same lifts to get into the office? Surely at some point they would turn up at the same time, and he'll be like, "Oh, what are you doing here?"
I imagine Milchek. I think all of management. So Milchek, Grainer, you know, who's now dead, and Cabell and Mzwang now. I don't think they use that lift. They'll have a separate entrance.
Yeah, because that would be like really painful, because then you would have to watch when he leaves,
exactly,
make sure he leaves, and then you would have to tail him and make sure that he goes in first, and then go in yourself, or get there really early and just you check if his car's there. If his car's there, then go, and you can get there before that doesn't make any sense, but yeah, like you say, it makes sense for another lift. But yeah, you wanted to mention about the title sequence has changed.
Yep, and I mean, I haven't watched any videos that are like scrutinizing them yet, but I'm sure Jen is watching one right now. I mean, I just want to say, I really like the first season title sequence. There's a part of me that looks at some bits of it, and I'm not sure that they've all come to be. But now we've got this new title sequence, and there's so much happening, and there's so many little bits that I think obvious cues to story elements that might happen later. So you've got the two sides of Mark, and they are way more, I don't want to say cooperative, but they're helping each other. Like, there's obviously this whole switching back and forth between innie and outie Mark. You know, the blue Mark and the red Mark. I don't know which one's innie, which one's outie. I think blue would be Lumon and red would be outie, but there's this whole thing where it's constantly switching between the two, but then sometimes they're helping each other. They're like carrying them, or they're putting them through. So there's clearly going to be a lot more sort of like working closer. Maybe they realise it, maybe they don't realise it. I'm not quite sure. But I think innie and outie Mark are going to be a bit more focused towards pretty much the same goal. And then there's other people in this title sequence. So Cabell, she's in this title sequence right at the end, at this sort of like big overwatching entity. But there's also a couple of other really interesting points of the title sequence. So at one point, Mark is on the bed, and there's lots of little Marks all around him, like on the bed and on the floor. And that's where this sort of like this reincarnation sort of idea kind of comes from a little bit as well. And then later on, Mark is on the bed again, and instead of lots of little Marks around, there's a tiny bearded baby. And then Jen was like, wait, is that Kia? Is that Kia Egan? I was like, oh, yeah, I guess so. He's got a beard. It's almost like he's being reborn. And then she was like, oh, no. And then thinking back to the other one where there's lots of Marks around, they might not have been lots of little Marks. They might have been lots of little Kia Egan. So maybe the testing floor, there's lots of half-dead people, and they're trying to like put Kia Egan's mind into all these people, and then seeing which one survives. And then whichever one survives is going to be the new Kia Egan. Maybe Gemma is going to wake up as Kia Egan in a year's time or something. So it's not Gemma anymore, it's just Kia Egan in Gemma's body. The new title sequence is really good, really creepy at times. There's a goat, so I think goats are going to be a lot more prevalent in this season, I guess, because people love that goat scene from season 1. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I don't know if you do any of this, but it's going to be interesting watching sort of like people who really analyze these videos. Like, there's communities out there that will like, overanalyze things, and there'll be YouTube videos about it. So it'll be interesting. They are interesting to watch, and it will be interesting to see what from the trailer will actually sort of like come to be. I think that's something I do quite like about the Severance trailers. That I keep calling it a trailer, the title sequence. Something I do quite like about the title sequence is that it is really relevant to what's going on in the story. Like some title sequences can be very sort of over the top, not related, or just nothing, just a nice bit of music. But this is like the piano score is perfect. The animation style fits really well. Like it's really good.
I just want to touch on what you said about the analyzing part. I don't really know. I wouldn't want to probably watch something like that because in some cases they will say this is what's indicating the plot is going to happen, and then when it does happen, you're like, well, it kind of didn't fulfill me because I already knew that by episode 3 or 4, and you kind of feel like I cheated a little bit. So I kind of want to just...
I mean, I get that.
I just want to watch it and discuss it like this with yourself, and then, like, there are certain things that you've brought to attention that I never thought of, like Helena or Haley, whoever, you know.
The thing is, it's like, I do normally feel that way about TV shows, and obviously it's going to be a bit different if we're going to be talking about it on the podcast, because literally the whole point of it is that we do kind of speculate a little bit. But I will say that Severance is the sort of TV show where it feels like you're supposed to have these conversations. You're supposed to try and guess what's going on, and you should find joy in getting it wrong and exuberance in getting it right. So for all my sort of like, I don't want spoilers, as long as no one is leaking information that is known, I have absolutely no problem watching fan speculation videos of, like, say, Severance, because I think that really is part of the whole package of this kind of show, because it's such a mysterious thriller TV show. I think that is actually a good... I think that's a good part of it, is to kind of analyze it, overanalyze it. Like, I genuinely think overanalyzing this TV show is a good thing. Like, it's great fun to kind of think about the fantastical things and try and think, is this too fantastical? Is it? It might not be. It could be. You know, I genuinely do think that is part of harboring a good community around this sort of like TV show. I mean, actually, Ben Stiller and Adam Scott, like Ben Stiller, you know Ben Stiller, right?
Yeah, the comedian actor, Night in the Museum.
He's the director or the showrunner. Like, he's the big person in charge of this TV show. And then Adam Scott is the main. He's Mark Scout. Those two are actually doing a podcast as well. I think episode by episode. I don't think I would listen to it myself because I think that they might potentially reveal things inadvertently. Like, I don't think they would mean to, but I feel like they might just say a sentence in a particular way that would sway you into believing a conspiracy or not believing a conspiracy, which you wouldn't do just from the source material. So from my perspective, I think if we talk about the source material that is available to us at the time, and we watch videos, podcasts that only talk about the source material, not leaks or anything else, then I think that's, for me, and I can only talk for me, I think that is fine for this type of TV show. Because it's not a spoiler. You're not spoiling anything. You're just speculating over things that could be, and then you should enjoy whichever one of the three theories it actually ends up being.
But then it ends up being none of them.
Yeah, it could end up being none of them. And again, like there should be a joy in being wrong just as much as there should be a joy in being right. So,
you know, that happened to me with one trilogy. I think it was like Saw, the Saw trilogy.
You're always bringing up Saw. Nothing happens. Yeah. They just eventually die.
No. Spoilers if you've not seen Saw. Like, well, it is spoilers, but basically, like, in Saw 5 and Saw 6, like, there was YouTube videos saying, okay, this is what's going to be the epic twist at the end. And they gave it away, and they gave very good evidence of it, of there being another member who's committing these crimes. Because
was the evidence from the previous films, or was it from...
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So it wasn't from leaks from set or the script?
No. And I was like, you know what? This looks very likely this is what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And then it did happen. Yeah. I was like, okay. And I kind of felt stupid. I shouldn't have not watched that video, but they were right.
Yeah.
They were 100% right with the and the evidence they had. It was quite conclusive as well. But yeah. I don't mind analyzing stuff. But yeah, I don't know. Like if you analyze that and you see someone's opinion, and it's like, here's the evidence for this, and you're like, well, yeah, it could be that. And then when it turns out it is that, you're like, I don't know. I like to go in these things a little bit with my own fresh opinion of it, but don't mind talking like this, discussing it. I don't want to over-analyze everything. Like every. It's like we didn't discuss Irvin. He got a note in his pocket from regarding Bert. So something like that might play into it as well, where he might be thinking, "Who's Bert? Does my innie have like?"
Well, I have a theory about that. I don't have a theory about that, but there is a theory about that. But if you don't want to hear it, you don't have to hear it.
No, I don't want to hear it.